that is considering what would it be like to have an ideal country rather than having another one like Switzerland, for instance, or another one like England. Just, we have something here that's new, that's ours, and we can forge ahead with not trying to be like anyone else, not trying to reproduce their kind of success, but using our own specific desires and our own talents to make our own country. And not try to make it like somebody else's, and not try to fit in necessarily with the rest of the world, but just have your own thing. Now, it's a big jump from that to like when I first started working for a company called Cetus Corporation back in 1979. They thought they had lots of ideas of their own. And they managed to get resources from other places in the world, and instead of trying to do things exactly like someone else had done them, they had a policy there that any of the scientists that were working for that company who wanted to do something on their own were allowed to do that. The policy was written that it said 10% of your time directing your laboratory procedures here can be devoted to whatever you want to do, and you don't have to ask anybody's permission to do it. You don't have to report every month on the progress of that particular project. You do it from yourself. And a lot of really interesting things happen because of that. And also people discovered quite quickly that there wasn't anybody really counting up how much of your time was being used for your own project. If your own project started to work, nobody cared about whether it was 10% or 100%. So you had the freedom to like generate brand new things. And when you're doing research, especially when you're trying to do something that's not just somebody else's kind of research, but innovative things, it's nice to not have somebody looking over your shoulder all of the time. And it is good to not be thinking, is our work comparable to this work being done by someone else? It's just good to have it come out of your heart, out of your own mind of what is going to happen. I was very successful in that kind of a system, and there were a number of other people that were at Cetus that were. And I think that same spirit of we are capable of doing our own thing here in Kazakhstan. We have a great potential. We don't want to be like some other country. We don't want to do things like anyone else necessarily. We want to do things our way and see how that works. And maybe it will, and I hope that it will. I hope that you will keep that sort of newness that you now have in your country alive. Don't try to be the 9th largest country in the world. Be the only Kazakhstan in the world, and see how that works. And I hope you're lucky at it. When you try something new, sometimes you fail, but keep that feeling alive as long as you can. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Dr. Morris, and from now on, the chair is of my partner. Thank all of you for listening until now and from now. Thanks a lot.
Уважаемые коллеги и друзья, a distinguished scholar. We are sorry a little bit that our Nobel laureates have to go because we are having a meeting with our president in just in 1 hour. So again, we appreciate being here. Thank you very much. I do believe that you all enjoy seeing our Nobel laureates, and I think we should all applaud them before they leave. Thank you.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, позвольте мы продолжим нашу сессию. Для меня большая честь представить слово бывшему генеральному секретарю Организации экономического сотрудничества и развития, партнеру компании Хин Блейки Канада, господину Дональдсу Джеймс Джонсону. Пожалуйста.
Thank you very much, co-chairs, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. I very much enjoyed the comments we just heard from 2 Nobel Prize winners. They're both leaving, unfortunately. I was going to comment on some of their comments. I want to tell you a little bit about the OECD and why mine. It was, I think, Richard Roberts who said, well, what am I doing here? This is an economic forum. The OECD is probably one of the most significant economic forums in the world. It stands for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It began as the Marshall Plan following World War II. It brings together the 34 most developed countries in the world. Hopefully Kazakhstan will join those ranks in the not-too-distant future. And it deals with every area of public policy effectively except defense. The GMO issues, which Richard referred to, are very much on the table of the OECD, try to sort out the political issues, similarly with synthetic biology, and so on. But I just want to say a few words to you about healthcare systems and why they were taken on by the OECD and introduced as a major health project in 1999, and that project continues. I was a former minister in the Canadian government in the 1980s. And during that period, we had to come to grips with revisions to the Canada Health Act. And in Canada, like here in Kazakhstan, the countries are very similar in many respects. Large uninhabited regions, tremendous resources, hydrocarbons, minerals, and so on. But the most important single resource that you have here in Kazakhstan, believe it or not, is people. And today, in our knowledge-based economies, people are more important than resources. The Japanese taught us that following World War II. With virtually no resources, they rose to become the second largest economy in history. Kazakhstan has that opportunity. You have wonderful resources. You have minerals, you've got hydrocarbons, you've got wonderful agricultural land, but the most important resource is people. Now, why is this important in terms of our economies? Well, there are 2 reasons. First of all, cost of healthcare systems, but secondly, the importance of having a healthy and well-educated population, because that's the most important resource you have. When I got to the OECD in 1996, I introduced what I called the Health Project. I wanted to compare health systems around the world to see why some, with less cost, were having better results, and some with escalating costs were not meeting the needs of the people. I cite, for example, the ongoing debate in the United States, the richest country in the world, where, as you know, health is a major challenge, a major problem to ensure that the principles that we all believe in today are met. Kazakhstan, as your last speaker said, in many senses is a new country. You have a healthcare system. You spend only 4 to 4.5% of your gross domestic product on health. That's one of the lowest in Western Europe, one of the lowest, in fact, in any of the developing countries. That number is bound to increase. In Canada, it's around 9%. In the United States, it's around 15%. And one of the reasons countries are concerned about health is it's the most fastest escalating cost of all governments. So we have to basically say, how can we meet the principles that should underlie a healthcare system and maintain costs? Now let me give you 3 principles which I think are pretty fundamental that we've heard mentioned even this morning. One is universality. We all recognize today that every citizen in every country should be covered by some healthcare system. Second is accessibility. Now I heard earlier, I think during the speech, that there is a method now, for example, to bring people even from the outgrowth regions to, I suppose, the large urban centers. And accessibility in Canada is a huge problem with enormous vast places in the country where there are not adequate medical facilities. But that kind of accessibility, but also accessibility in terms of not having too long lineups for critical procedures, waiting lists. For example, the Danes came to me and said, we have more doctors, we have more beds than the French, but we have waiting lists. Why do we have waiting lists? And they gave the OECD about $250,000, as I recall, to study that particular problem. How could that happen? Well, there are many reasons for that happening. And I can't go into all of that today because it's too complex an issue, but it's extremely complex, the whole issue of basically health care in all of our countries. So you want to have universality, you want to have accessibility and equity, and then also affordability. Now, in my country, universal health care almost became a religion. People talked about it as if we couldn't change it. It was frozen in time, not recognizing that our system, like almost every system in the world, in the developed world, was broke. It wasn't working. It had evolved to a point where it was no longer functioning as it should, and I'll tell you why that is. In all of our countries in the OECD, we have rapidly aging populations. The replacement rate is not met in any of the countries in the OECD from our basic populations except in Mexico and in Turkey. Kazakhstan, you may give me the number, but I think it's just around replacement rate when I looked at it the last time. Something like 2.1, I think, per woman of childbearing age is what's required to keep the population stable. But we have found over time that as countries develop and as they become richer, and you're now at $12,000 per head, roughly, in terms of per capita GDP, that you will in the future experience the same challenges that are being experienced in all of our countries. Namely, an aging population, an increase in non-communicable diseases, in chronic diseases. Some people, for example, at my age and older, have as many as 5 diseases going on at the same time. And this is very, very expensive. The good news is that we're living longer, more productive. The offset for that, of course, is cost. So the issue of affordability has attracted the attention of departments of finance around the world, and that's why I brought ministers of finance and ministers of health together in Paris to discuss these issues and to compare our practices. Now I want to leave you with this note. When you join the OECD, and in fact you may be an observer now,